Hello to everybody.
Today, I'll be talking about the relationship with violence and sociocultural elements. Hostility or aggression and violence are mainly confused, are quite often confused. Violence is normally an act of hostility. It is a behavior and it can be directed towards the person himself or towards another people or towards other masses of people. It is speculated that violence is caused by genetic factors or environmental factors or social factors. But we know that the emotions are universal and anger is one of the most essential emotions. But it is not the sole reason for violence because anger is also a reflection of distrust and injustice, etc., or sadness, etc. There are many social standards whether the behavior of the person is wrong or right. So cultural norms determine that. The expression of a person's behavior or his anger or his parenthood or his gender roles are defined by cultural norms, and these norms makes it impossible for us to think the behaviors of the person totally independent from the society and culture. Freud shows and says that violence is an internal behavior of the person, but there are lots of social hypotheses about the expression of violence. The first of which is the hindered violence, which has a social approach inside. If the person has an impulse, and if this impulse is blocked or hindered, the person becomes violent towards this obstacle. But it also makes us remember that the theory of needs of Mindsack, the accommodation and security, feeling secure, and not feeling the hunger, feeding yourself, etc. If there's a blockage of one of these fundamental needs, then the person can be violent or hostile for meeting his or her most basic needs. The second theory is social learning theory. Bobodol experiment by Bandura is the experiment version of this. Yasemin Hoca has talked about it a lot, and you can also watch this experiment in YouTube as well. The others is Milgram experiments made after the Second World War, the genocide orders by the commanders and the soldiers' compliance to these orders needs to be understood. With this hypothesis, these experiments set off. The obedience towards orders and the individual decision making towards a higher authority are questioned in this experiment. In an artificial experimental environment, the people push one button and electrify someone, and they should push the button until an order is given to stop. But this is an illusion, of course, because the button does not actually electrify another person. There is only an illusion of it, only the voices of persons in pain, etc. And the purpose, the objective is to understand whether the respondents will consent to giving some others pain or disobey the order and stop the suffering of the other persons. So it is found that the people actually do not really stop pushing the button, and they leave the final decision to stop sufferings of others to the authority. And they don't take responsibility for that. This is an important another experiment, the Stanford prison experiment. And it was ended in the sixth day of the experiment due to ethical issues. It was made by Stanford universities. People are divided into two groups, and in Stanford universities, one part of the university becomes a prisoner. Some people are the prisoners, the others are wardens. And after some time, this imbalance of authority, the people in the prison starts to behave like prisoners. The people who are the guards start to act like guardians. But this was not unethical. Therefore, the experiment was finished, terminated in the 6th day. So if the person has the motive to lead or guard some group, the people become more hostile and violent because they adapt to their roles in this social life. Violence increases, this is important, and about the increase of the violence, there is a violence culture concept. So any kind of cultural issues, the films, TV shows, music, the language spoken, etc., increase the violence, and the increase of this violence shapes the social identity. If this is disturbed with an external intervention, then the people also show violence. Bullying, it is defined in the previous presentations. I would like to add that if you intervene with the language or gender or race of this person, if you bully them for that, this is a biased bullying. And according to WHO, there are some risk factors about violence, about psychopathology risk factors are their other name. The abuse, the addiction, and neglect or harassment, etc., are the ways of violence according to WHO. The most important one is the cycle of poverty, the culture of poverty, and the concepts of poverty, different types of poverty, like cycle of poverty, culture of poverty, etc. Because the people in poverty are unable to get rid of this cycle of poverty easily in terms of financially or socially. Therefore, this poverty and the hopelessness is transmitted from one generation to other, and the risks of abuse, harassment, and neglect, etc., are increasing, and some younger people are exposed to this kind of risks for some people, and according to Gandhi, this is the worst version of violence. Immigration is also impacting violence. This is not a new concept, of course, but in the recent periods, there have been many research about that. Turkey is holding the highest number of child immigrants, more than any other country in the world. The immigrants come from Syria and Afghanistan, and the children who are most exposed to violence are the ones who had to cross the border on their own. They are most of the time unable to complete their education, and the countries to receive immigration have many varying policies, and this uncertainty and this Maslow's needs hierarchy, the basic needs in the bottom of this pyramid, cannot be met, cannot be fulfilled by these people, like accommodation and employment, education, and so on. And this uncertainty results in violence as well. So homicides and the effect of immigration on violence is discussed like that. If a person immigrates, there should be the cause of immigration should be to escape violence in their own country most of the time, but they face violence in the target country as well. But if the person has good relationships with his or her family, then violence that the person is exposed to decreases as well. Of course, there are lots of other parameters in this case according to law and legal and healthcare services in the target country as well. Bullying is observed in the children as well. The main reason is language. If the child is unable to speak the language of the target country, they are more likely to be bullied. In the later years, this bullying decreases, and the tendency of suicide is also decreased. The only exception is that is the Turkish girls in the Netherlands. The study was unable to find a reason for the suicide tendency in Turkish girls in the Netherlands. Delice Yaşar has interviewed the criminal records in Mersin and in Erzurum. And they have seen, they wanted to find whether the criminals are natives or immigrants. The other study, by the way, they couldn't find any differences. Another study talks about the students who do not want to go to school because they have the fear of bullying. And another study talks with the teachers, and the teachers also say that the immigrant students show more violent behavior than the native ones, and the reason could be due to their culture or the warfare in their country and the aggression that it inflicts upon them. And the violence perpetrators are not normally the children, but their parents as well. In the preschool period, the immigrant children are showing more aggression. And something that I'm very interested in is that in mixed classes with students with both native and immigrants, the violence is not really different from the whole immigrant classes. In the mixed classes, the theory of mind skill is higher in the students, and the students learning empathy in the schools decreases the violence towards the immigrants. Another social impact is pandemic. It affects a lot of things in the world, of course, one of which is the inter-house relationships. It had a result of increasing violence, and the reason is the uncertainty, the loss of autonomy, and being caged in, being locked up in the house. This blockage, I told about the blockage, results with the increase of violence, increase of alcohol use, and increase of inequalities, not only among the spouses, between the spouses, but also among the children as well. One Pakistan and one Latin America study, two different studies, show that the violence against healthcare workers also increased during the pandemic, and the reason is the misinformation campaigns and the obstacles of meeting the most basic healthcare needs, and the increasing workload causing stress in the healthcare professionals and healthcare workers, increasing panic and fear, and the quality of life and quality of health levels of people are the main reasons of violence towards healthcare professionals. The interpersonal violence increases in this study, which has a wider comprehension, and the study shows us that the explosions, the wars, etc., increases the violence levels of people. The pandemic in Turkey increased the household violence. One of the risk factors of increasing violence is to be married, is to have kids, is to be unemployed, and not loving one another, the increasing workload in the house, and the negative impacts of the quarantine, of the lockdown. Social impacts in the other titles also include the gender roles. This masculinity concept is built upon the righteousness of the man, and is built upon this inequality, is being man the decision maker, etc. If the masculinity description is perceived like that, the violence also increases in the environment. The firearms, if the firearms are present in the environment, the violence increases, wounding or injuring one another, include as well the homicides. Homicidal or suicidal behaviors are mainly related with firearms, and with the globalization, the firearms culture increases, and thereby the violence increases as well. In the adolescence and adulthood, the homicidal behaviors are increasing, and in the more elderly ages, the suicidal behaviors are increasing. In the rural areas, the violence about homicides. In the city areas, the suicidal is mainly related with firearms. This is a film that stars an anger management coach, which is Jack Nicholson. Jack Nicholson tells Adam Sandler that there are two people to show anger. The first one is shouting the cashier because his discount coupons are not accepted. The other one is the cashier. The cashier listens and listens, but if you reach the limit, he would kill the whole supermarket. So some people have other and different reactions to stress and the risk factors before they turn violent. There are some individual, resistance of the person, empathy, ego and superego of the person, the communicative skills of the person finding meaning in life and so on are the parameters, individual parameters that have an effect on violence. This is important in terms of self-regulation of the people. Prevention is the topic of the rest of my presentation. There are some individual endeavors as well, but the WHO and UNICEF organized and inspired an acronym. They have widespread examples in their websites as well, changing the laws and implementation of enforcement of laws, the norms and values and safe environments. You can read them on the board. It includes the economic empowerment and so on. This is very important too. The CDC also has some recommendations to prevent violence, very similar to WHO. They focus on the preschool and school education about violence. They also recommend to build a bridge between the youth and the elderly. And we say, why not? It could be tried. They have recommended some mentorship programs, and they have the similar recommendations about the child abuse. APA has anti-bullying website. It has many recommendations and things to do if you are bullied. This is OHCHR from the United Nations. There are some work groups here working to prevent culture, which mainly focuses on the life skills of the kids, of the children. And they have also a subject to observe children, observe the behaviors of children. And it's like, when I was a kid, for example, everybody in our neighborhood knew me, and my, parents knew the kids of our neighbors as well. So it's like, something like that it reminds me of. The names of these websites you can visit from my presentation. That's all I have to say. Thank you.